Okay.
But I think I'll just get started at least with the intro. Welcome everyone. Thank you for logging on and attending this morning's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, just a few things to note. Please let me know in the chat if there are any technical issues that I can try to resolve. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button. This program was made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Chef Trisha Pérez Kennealy. Trisha is the owner of the Inn at Hastings Park, a landmark in Lexington. For the past year and a half, she has done many cooking programs with the library, as well as created videos for the Inn's Instagram account. We're grateful for her always sharing her diverse knowledge of foods and techniques. And just in time for the good weather this weekend, Trisha will talk to us today about grilling. So now please welcome Trisha.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back with Cary Library. I'm broadcasting live from the Culinary Garden featuring Whispering Angel here at the Inn at Hastings Park. So let me give a little bit of a tour first. So as I said, this is my cooking platform. And the reason I have us a little bit on an angle is I'm gonna want you to see what I'm doing grill-wise. There are 4 tables set up in the garden and people are dinner here in our garden, whether for lunch or brunch on the weekends. And then we have a menu. And then dinner is actually a beautiful tasting menu that was our partner in
Trisha.
England. We traveled a lot throughout Europe and I was a big fan. Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're just,
Did we freeze?
Yeah, it's a little laggy or frozen. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, that's okay. Did it come back?
Kind of, it's a little blurry. Okay, I think it's back. Yeah, there we go. I think it's back. Sorry.
I'm going to stay a little bit closer to the camera because maybe the distance was also contributing to it. So the point being that I absolutely love rosé wine. So I was delighted to be able to partner with the rosé company. This is also great for me because I actually have a live audience today. We have some guests from the Inn, my dear friend Christina Blau, who's a huge supporter of public libraries. She's a trustee of that library in that town, that rival town. But does incredible work, supporting public libraries. So it's nice to have people here in person. So let's get to it. I love grilling, and I think I can't even remember when I started. I think my dad was always a big barbecuer. I think living in Puerto Rico, we cook a lot outside, so it's something that I really enjoy doing. And I know that sometimes a lot of people are reluctant about flame and fire with the grill. So the most important thing to know when you're working with meat and grilling is you have to have an understanding of the fat content of the protein or vegetables that you're cooking. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna make a steak and 2 different pieces of chicken. And one of the secrets that I use, especially when I'm doing, so tomorrow night, we're hosting, I think we're having 20 people. Yay, we can have people at the house. But I'm doing racks of lamb. And racks of lamb have a fat cap on them. So that is something that when you put it on the grill, you're gonna get instant flame and fire if you put it right over the flame. Same thing with chicken. So there's 2 ways to kind of get around that. The way that I use today is that I actually parboiled my chicken thighs today. I parboiled them for about 20 minutes. And these are skin on chicken thighs. So I parboiled them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that they're pretty dry. I have some paper towel here. The reason I want to make sure that they're dry is that if there's any moisture on them, it's going to take away from getting that crispiness on the chicken the skin that I absolutely love. And I am a chicken fanatic. And my favorite part, I have no problem saying this, is the crispy skin on the outside. It's the fat that sort of does it. I'm using my camp mix, as many of you know, one of my favorite seasonings. I'm going to season this liberally, and then I'm going to put it skin side down on the grill. This is a gas grill. I have it on a high heat. And the way the flame on this, the way my burners are an oval here, right? If you have a traditional, like a lot of the Weber grills, charbroil, the burners they run this way. So they run sort of perpendicular to the bottom of the grill. If you're cooking something with high fat content, indirect heat is your friend. This is a little bit harder on this. This is a portable Weber barbecue. It's called a Q. It's a little bit harder here. So what I've done is I pushed the chicken away from the flame bar, right? So it's not coming directly. So the fat, when it comes out of the meat, isn't going right onto the flame, because that's what's going to give you that flare up. So that's what's happening there with those. The other pieces of chicken that I'm going to cook, I actually have some boneless chicken thighs. If you are looking to do a quick weeknight dinner on the grill, this is also your friend, right? So I'm going to put these, because these don't really have much fat. I'm actually going to put these right over the flame. I'm going to season them generously beforehand. And I'm going to put it right over that bar that's right over the flame. If you are using a larger grill, which most of you will have at home, what you're going to do is you are going to warm up your grill for 10-15 minutes. And the way I do that is I turn on every burner at high heat. When I'm ready to cook, I cut the heat on the middle grill, the middle burners, so there's no direct flame. And all of the heat is coming from the perimeter of the grill. Does that make sense? If you are using a charcoal grill, what you do is you want to put all of the charcoal on one side of the kettle, right? So the dome of that charcoal grill, and I'm thinking primarily of the Smoky Joe, which is that traditional Weber charcoal grill that's the round. You want to kind of put it over to the side. If you're working, like some people have the green iron by the Japanese, the ceramic Japanese clay pot, that indirect heat. So as you can see, I'm really generously seasoning that, and I'm going to close that grill. Now, we're going to talk about steak. Again, let's talk about fat contents. So the leanest cut of meat is going to be your tenderloin, right? Very, very little fat in it. So when you cook that, you really need to be careful that you don't dry it out. That indirect heat is so key for that. You do not want to be putting that filet right on top of that flame. The grill will be hot enough. Most of you have temperature gauges on the outside of that grill. If you're in the 500 to 700 range, you are going to get that sear. It is probably a good idea to rub very, very thin layer of olive oil on that tenderloin, right? Because it has no fat in it. If you go to the strip, which I have a strip here, you're going to get that layer of fat on the side. Now, what I've done here, and this was sort of for purposes of our demonstration today, I actually, and some of you have heard me talk about this before, I used a cooking method called sous vide. And what sous vide means is under pressure. I used what's called an immersion circulator to cook this piece of beef. Now, this piece of beef is actually fully cooked. It was cooked to 131 degrees, which is medium rare. It was cooked. When you cook sous vide, basically what you're doing is you're creating a hot water bath at a constant temperature. So at 131, if this is in a vacuum sealed bag surrounded by water, what it ensures is that every part of this meat is at 131. The challenge with grilling is that the outside of the steak gets cooked, but that inside, tends to take a little bit longer. So sometimes you get a quarter of an inch, an eighth of an inch of cooked, and then it's like that juicier part. What I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to prevent there from being as much shrinkage. So that's what I did in terms of cooking it sous vide. The other way that you can achieve this again is really making sure you make indirect heat on your grill your best friend. Okay. So what I've done here is, and you can see, there's my fat, that fat cap. And that, if I put that right over the flame, as that cooks and drips down, it's gonna go crazy. That's what's gonna make it flare up and make it scary when you cook. So keeping it away from, from that source of heat. What I'm gonna do right now is I wanna check my chicken. So I see that this chicken, see, I'm pushing it, there, it came right off. So one of the mistakes that we make in American cooking, whether or not we're using a grill, if we're using a cast iron pan, is we're sometimes too quick to flip. If I go to move this and it's sticking, that means that it hasn't cooked enough. It means that it's a little bit more to go, see? Because I'm tearing that skip by doing that. I'm just gonna let that go a little bit more. What's happening here in terms of the chicken, and I'll bring the camera over so that you can see, is that we're getting that color change. And if you want to come over and see, you're more than welcome to. So it's going from, how raw meat had a kind of is almost translucent. What's now going to happen, it's going to become more opaque, right? It's going to turn that white color and it's going to be all the way through. The reason I like to cook chicken thighs on the grill is because, again, there is a little bit of that fat. This is the dark meat, is the fattier meat. A lot of times when people cook chicken breasts, they get dried out because it's just a leaner piece. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking advantage of the natural fattiness of this particular cut to make sure that it stays juicy. And as you can see, I really didn't trim off. That's the fat there. You could trim that off, after you cooked it. Sometimes when I cook, I loved using chicken thighs if I'm going to do like a chicken fajita, if I'm going to just put some shredded grilled chicken on a salad. I just really like it because to me, it's just a lot more flavorful. And I don't really need to add oil, right? Like I'm not brushing the chicken thigh down with oil because it naturally has that fattiness in it. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do is when I cook my meat sous vide, I want to make sure again that it's nice and dry because again, I want to be able to seal in what's happening there. So paper towel, and this was, paper towel that I'd used from inside. I'm now going to season that again. And it's important too, if you wanted to do this ahead of time, you could sous vide your steaks and then have them at room temperature and just sear them off and you'd be good to go. Alternatively, I know that a lot of people hear me talk about an immersion circulator and they're like, oh, that must be really expensive. You can get an immersion circulator for around $200. And I'm not saying that that's not expensive, but the advantage to using the immersion circulator is that there's very little shrinkage in your meat, right? I make an investment when I'm buying meat for my family. I buy a lot of my meat from River Rock Farm. I buy meat from Codman Farm out in Lincoln. I buy grass-fed meat. So the price on that, is getting closer to $18, $19, $20 a pound. So if I'm going to make that type of investment in that type of protein, I want to make sure that I'm getting as little shrinkage as possible. So the way I think about it, if I'm ensuring that I'm perfectly cooking that piece of meat, then that's just a much better investment. And as people have heard, like throughout the months, I am not a big kitchen gadget girl, right? Like get your chef's knife, know how to use your pots, and you're kind of good to go. But this is actually one thing that is worth sort of looking into and sort of understanding. And maybe at the end of the year, we'll do a whole thing on sous vide cooking. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
There were a couple.
Audience?
There were a couple that came in. If you want to, if some of them are just re-explaining things, but what do you mean by? Someone asked, "What do you mean by parboil?"
Parboil. Okay, great question. The question was, what do I mean by parboil? So what you do is you put the cold meat. So this, I parboil chicken. To parboil the chicken, what I do is I put the pieces of chicken in cold water and I bring it to a boil and I let it cook for about 20, 25 minutes. This is the byproduct. This is the liquid that I use from cooking it. I'm saving it because I know that I'm making a rice pilaf tomorrow. And instead of like using like canned or bottle or boxed chicken stock, this is going to be my base. That top layer is that lovely chicken fat that adds flavor. And then that's chicken infused water, which will just add flavor to my pilaf. So parboil means to put the meat in the water. You can parboil potatoes, right? If you wanted to parboil potatoes before you cook them. So I can sort of tell by the smoke that's coming up, right? Kind of what's happening with my meat. These pieces of chicken, see, they came off nice and easily. There was no sticking. I did not force that. Again, same thing with this one. Didn't force it. Flipped right over. I've got those nice grill marks. I can tell here, gonna bring the phone over. Again, see, I'm beginning to get that whiteness through. I'm flipping over. Look at those nice grill marks. So this is my grill. Some of you guys have heard me talk about my passion for the New England Patriots. This is what I take to, that one probably could have stayed a little bit longer because it was kind of off that flavor bar a little bit. This is what I use when I tailgate. Great grill for camping. I also can tell that this steak is ready to go. I can see, oh, maybe not. Oh, I'm getting a little bit, oh, it released. Look at those beautiful, beautiful sear marks. All right. I'm going to let that go for about, and I'm touching it, right? But I also have my thermometer. The worst thing that you can do to check whether a steak is cooked is cut the meat open on the grill, any of the meat, because if you cut it, you're going to release all of the juices. So I'm taking this thermometer, I'm coming in. All right, I'm going to give that a minute and then I'm going to take it off and then I'm going to let it rest. So that is the other important thing about grilling, right? When I see people, when we go, I love being invited to people's house to eat. And my friends have said it, that sometimes they're a little intimidated about having me over for dinner. And I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be intimidating. I love very simple food. I love all sorts of food. The fact that you're cooking for me is the greatest gift in the world. Steak, like especially whenever I grill at our house, it doesn't go near the grill. Like that, they want to open the grill. And I'm like, do not open my grill if I have not given you permission, because I have it all timed out in my head. And people have a tendency to open up those grills too much. The most important thing, we're going to take this off and we are going to let this piece of meat rest for 5 minutes. We're not going to cut into it, as I said, to see if it's done. We're going to let it rest for 5 minutes because scientifically what needs to happen is that the proteins need to come back together. If I cut it right now, all of the juice is going to seep out of it, right? And what was a medium rare steak is now going to look like pale gray when you go to serve it because every piece of liquid is going to come out of it. So while we're waiting for the chicken to finish off and that steak to rest, I want to talk about sauces that go with our barbecue. So I started making here, I think everyone sort of saw me mixing or chopping shallots at the beginning. I am going to do a play on chimichurri. Chimichurri is an Argentinian steak sauce. It's a staple in the Kennealy household. It is the condiment of choice on the steak sandwich that we serve at Gillette when we're tailgating. It's usually made with parsley. When made the Argentinian way. The Puerto Rican way, we add cilantro. And what I want to show you is another feature in my beautiful, this was another one of my silver linings. So this is my garden bed. And say hi to Christina. Say hi, Christina. So in my garden bed, I have lavender, I have arugula, I have thyme, I have chives, my beautiful parsley. This is also another one of my lettuce mixes. I have cilantro, lettuce. We've been doing here at the inn is we've been coming back into the yard. Oh, did it come up?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
we're
it's
back
back
here.
now. Yep,
Can you hear me?
I
All right,
can,
but did
yes.
you get to see my garden? Okay.
Yes.
So what's incredible to me, these flower beds were planted in the beginning of May. And this is the abundance. I have 4 of those. And I am like having the best time with them. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make a little bit of a sauce. But what I want to show you, because I'm getting a sense of the time here, see how I know everyone's like, how's that chicken? How do I know the chicken's done? That bone, there's no redness on that bone, right? And I'm sort of beginning to see the meat pull away from it a little bit. Because a lot of times, most of my friends are like, oh my God, when I barbecue chicken, I get, it's like charred, right? So the other thing is when you use barbecue sauce, right? So my thing is wait until the end to put on your barbecue sauce, especially if you are using, so this is Blue Ribbon. My family loves Blue Ribbon barbecue. This is their sweet one. This has a high sugar content. If you are putting anything on meat that has a high sugar content, if it's too high of a heat, it's going to turn into carbon. It is going to burn and it is going to taste disgusting. So what I like to do is I like to serve the sauce on the side, right? Or take the chicken off the grill, toss it in the sauce, put it back on for 2 or 3 minutes. You don't need to be cooking it the whole time with the barbecue sauce on it, especially if it's a sugar base. If you're going North Carolina style and it's more vinegar based, then fine, be my guest, go to it. Okay. So I'm going to take these pieces of chicken off. The other thing I love about the chicken thighs is I actually sometimes I will in the summer, I'll cook off like 15 or 16 of these, put them in the refrigerator, and then I have them as lunch for the week. I have house guests right now. I call them my Viking children. My roommate from college lives in Oslo, and I picked up her boys go to school here in the States, so I picked them up. One of them is 6'4", the other is 6'7". So the amount of food that I'm cooking in my house just went up exponentially. Her older son, he literally told me that he could eat 8 chicken thighs in a sitting, and I've seen it. So I'm going to be grilling a lot and making sure there's a lot of protein in our house. So I'm also checking these chicken thighs, and I can see it's all running clear. So these are ready to come off as well. And again, see, there's no sticking. Even if I was going to shred this chicken up, I wouldn't shred the chicken up before putting in the grill. Try to cook those pieces as whole, because it's just going to and look at like you can see like the juiciness coming right off. And as I said, I did not put any oil on this. I just basically I used the fat. And of course, if you're trying to be conscious about the fat, you could trim a little bit of that. Oops. You could trim a little bit of the fat off after you finish cooking. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about this chimichurri sauce that I started talking about. So the chimichurri, I put some shallots in this time. We had shallots at the house, so I used them. They have a little bit of a more mellow flavor. You could use red onion if you wanted. But what I'm going to do is I have this amazing bucket. Actually, it's a little too heavy because I soaked it in water. So these are my chives with my beautiful chive flowers. I'm just going to switch out my board because this board had raw meat on it. I'm going to sterilize my knife with my alcohol wipes. That's also something you want to be very conscious of when you're grilling, right? Making sure you have glass containers with covers for all of your meats, keeping those raw meats separated from other things. This is my trash bin over here. All right, so I'm gonna mix it up. I have these beautiful chives and this chive flower. So this is the top of the chive. It's edible and it tastes delicious. So I'm gonna use it to add a little bit of the color. I'm just breaking it up, putting it right in. In the back in the igloo, we're actually sprouting nasturtium right now. So those are the edible flowers. the whole purpose of this garden was to really fill it with things that were edible. Obviously the lavender, what we're doing with the lavender is we're drying the lavender and making sachets for our guest rooms. Lavender, as most people know, it helps induce sleep. So to help people sleep better while we're here, we're going to use those. And then we're just making a whole variety of different things. And as the season progresses, there'll be tomatoes and some peppers. We have some peppermint for mojitos growing in some of the bins. And the other thing that I'll show you in a minute is we actually planted some dwarf fruit trees. So those are dwarf fruit trees. I'm really excited. The arbor that I was sort of walking through that you couldn't see, the roses have begun to sprout. So there's one, I think there's actually two, but the timing is perfect because we're having a big event here in the garden next week to sort of launch the season, as they would say. So I'm taking the chives and I'm putting it in. In this jar, my love for mason jars, I have red wine vinegar, a very, very generous tablespoon or teaspoon of salt, and I'm just putting the chives in. So I'm going to finish cutting these up. And while I'm doing that, Matt, are there any other questions?
Yeah, a couple more had come in. What was the the chicken seasoning that you had used, and where can you get it?
That mix, you can buy it at Market Basket and at Wilson Farm. I also like to use adobo, which is a Goya product that you can get it at, again, Market Basket, Stop and Shop, but there's also some very good, so adobo means to season in Spanish. In Puerto Rico, when we say adobo, what we're talking about is this dry rub that consists of, it's like salt, onion powder, garlic. There's a little bit of turmeric for color, but there's also some really good recipes online for it. Obviously, there was a little bit of backlash last year against Goya. So a lot of people, resorted to making their own, which is fine. And it was actually really quite tasty. What I'm
Oh,
looking for,
could you repeat what was the name of the other one that wasn't adobo? That's what somebody had
Camp Mix,
asked.
I'll show it to you. So this is Camp Mix.
Camp mix?
Yep, and I can even tell you where it is. If you walk into Wilson Farm and you walk into the entrance, the tomatoes, like the main hothouse tomatoes are usually right there on the left. Right under it is the whole Camp Mix family, because there's this beautiful, the original one, but then there's one for seafood, there's one for spuds, there's one for that has cinnamon and sugar in it. So they have a whole variety. But really, I mean, this is very simple too. You could try to replicate it at home. It's garlic, onion, black pepper, salt, celery salt, and white pepper. So I have my mason jars and I'm going to shake.
There was another question about what temperature was the grill at? High, medium, high, etc.
So, okay, so let's talk about temperatures on the grill. This is a one burner grill, so I really don't have much of a choice. If I was going to do my chicken thighs the whole way on this grill, what I would have done is I would have put it on low and I would have left them for about an hour. Being careful to put the chicken around the perimeter of the burner, not over directly. Okay, so let's talk about temperatures. Low and slow, chicken thighs, ribs, pork ribs, low and slow. Heat up the grill, get it all the way up to 500, and then when you put the meat down, adjust those burners so that you're about 200 and the way to like 250. And the way I do that is I leave the perimeter on and I turn the middle off. Low and slow. Pork, my chicken thighs, high fat, my racks of lamb, high fat. Okay. Um, when I want to get that quick sear, it's good to have something on high, something at low. I want to get those grill marks. I could put quick sear to get those steak to get the grill mark, and then I'm going to move it off to the indirect heat. You can do the same thing. So what I'm talking about, when I'm talking high heat, some of these gas grills, if you have 4 to 6 burners, you're getting in the 500 to 700 range. Okay. So when you play with it, you're going to have that high heat, that really high temperature over the flame, and then you can move it off, to the low side. If you're at all concerned about that flare up, that low, like that high and low system works really, really well. You can get the sear, but then you can cook it gently on the low side, and it helps prevent those flare-ups. Now, the other trick that I just did right now, I left my grill on even though there's nothing on it. The reason I did that is I can then use my stainless steel brush, my grill brush, and scrape it right down. So oftentimes what I do when we are eating dinner is I will take the meat off the grill and I will set a 10-minute timer. And when it goes off, I go outside, I scrape down my grill, and then I'm ready to go the next time that I cook. So now, in terms of the moment of truth, let's see how I did with this steak. So I can tell that this is a meat, I can tell by looking at this plate. Look at those, some of those juices that are coming out. Oops, do I get the angle? Oh, it's, there we go. You see it? I can tell that we've got some medium rare, oops, medium rare action going on. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this steak. So the other trick of the trade that they try to make sure that we understand when we're in culinary school, I highly recommend investing in a good digital thermometer, right? This is Weber's. I have Thermopens. We've talked about these before. And I'm going to stick it through the side. A strip is a little bit difficult because it's not so thick. So I'm just going to come in through the side here. Oh, and it's telling me that this is at 130.6.8. So this should be right where I want it for a medium steak. And notice, as I said, I didn't like cut this open to check. So I'm just cutting across. Oh yeah, there we go. Might be a little bit more than I wanted because I let it sit for a little bit, but we've got that pink, that pinkness to it. But notice that it's pink all the way through. There isn't like a, you know, a chunk. So the way I would serve this at home, I have big wooden cutting boards and I cut it. I cut it and I lay it out on a board because then the ends, you know, sometimes are a little bit more cooked. And you know, if you want it more well done, I'm happy to do that, right? That's totally fine. But I do have to tell people, if you've never tried a medium rare steak because you're kind of afraid of it, I really encourage you to do so. It is a different flavor experience. The other thing too is when people tell me, oh, I love filet mignon and I love it well done. Don't waste your money. I truly mean it. A filet mignon is the most, you know, if you go into the Chateaubriand, like that center, it's the most expensive cut of meat. It is not worth it to eat it well done, right? Buy eye of the round and cook it well done, and you're going to have the same experience. I don't think that you're going to be able to tell the difference, and it's just, I truly mean that it is not worth it to waste the money. I also want to cut the chicken so that you can see. So it's juicy. See, it's coming right through. Right, there's no pinkness, but there's still, you know, that liquid that's coming through. So what I would do in terms of the, you know, I would put a few pieces. And here's the other thing. I think we all grew up thinking that a portion of steak was that whole thing, right? A portion of protein, the best measure for what your measure of protein is the palm of your hand, right? Exactly. Susan just said, not my partner's hand. Exactly, right? And I know I'm a pro. I can throw down a 16-ounce bone-in ribeye. I have no problem doing it. And I love it, but it's not the best thing for me to be doing health-wise. So this is kind of the reason why home is that it's kind of a right. As I said, he's 1.5 feet taller than I am. So he requires a lot more protein than I do. So that's kind of just the rule of thumb about that. I want to make sure that you can also see this. Do you see that pinkness? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake this up a little bit. And so my chimichurri that I've made in my jar, I can put this in my refrigerator and it's good to go. You will need to take it out before you serve it because when it's in the refrigerator, the oil is going to congeal and become solid. But if you just put it out on the counter in the afternoon when you're going to serve it, it'll kind of return to this. You can keep it indefinitely because the fat is going to sort of get it. I'm actually going to go in with my fork and take some of this yumminess and do this. Well, I was so intent on forks that I didn't really have a spoon. So that is kind of my on the fly chimichurri. We're going to turn this into finger food today.
Thank you.
All right. I'll give you some chicken thighs. See, the advantage of coming and taking cooking classes at the inn is that you get to try what I make. So if anybody wants to come on down, you know, if you could be down here in 5 minutes, you get a taste. So what other questions do we have, Matt?
Um, Someone, I think you had touched on this, so maybe you're repeating it, but how do you season or spray the grill so that the food doesn't stick and mess up the grill slats?
Okay, so in terms of the sticking to the grill, again, know what you're cooking, right? So the chicken thighs, I didn't spray it down because there was the fat content. I didn't spray down the grill because of the fat in the strip. Filet mignon, I would actually oil the meat itself, like very, very thin layer, okay? The key thing is like having that super high temperature on your grill, because if you have that super high temperature, things are gonna get heated up and they're not gonna stick to the grill. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And what temperature should the chicken be at when ready if you can't do it by eye?
If you can't do it by eye, I want to double check. So it should be like at 160, but I will double check that because there's the challenge with chicken is that sometimes you get a different temperature read on the breast than you do on the thigh because of the fat content. But what I can do is I will send Matt a grid with grill and temperature so that everyone stays in the safe zone.
Uh, Also, for materials to send up, do you happen to have a recipe for the chimichurri sauce?
I have the recipe for the chimichurri sauce. So the key thing about the chimichurri sauce is I play with it, right? I make it with cilantro. I make it with parsley. I just made it with chives and shallots. Use the herbs that you have available to you, but be aware of kind of what mixes. Like some things might be too overpowering. I also have fresh oregano here in the garden that I could have put in that as well. I kind of went a little mild, like a little subtler, like French hints today with my shallots and my chives. We also have a great salsa verde right now in the restaurant that's using a lot of these herbs, and it has capers in it, so it adds that briny saltiness to it. So we're playing with it, but I'll send the recipe. So I kind of describe it as a barbecue vinaigrette, right? Because you have that oil vinegar combination. I like to do half and half, because I like the tanginess of the vinegar. But some people like more oil. They sort of take it that way. So, what other questions do we have today?
Um, I think this is a question more so about how long to rest meat, but they said that this person said that they like to eat their food when it's hot, but resting the meat cools it off. Do you eat it at room temperature?
It does not. Resting the meat does not. You will not lose the temp. Think about it this way: when a steak comes off the line in the restaurant, you're not getting it immediately. It takes us 2 to 4 minutes to get it to your table, right? And we are resting that meat because we know that if we bring it to you, like right out of it, you're going to cut it open, and by the time you finish eating it, it's not going to taste great. So I would highly recommend that it does not cool off. If you were doing something like you want to rest, like you could rest it on a burner that you weren't using on your stove. Does that make sense? You can rest it on the counter. You also have to be very careful about aluminum foil, because if you wrap it tightly in an aluminum foil, it's going to continue cooking and it's going to take it past. So the other thing too about the temperature for the beef and the lamb, the temperature that I tell you, you want to take it off the grill about 5 degrees lower than the desired doneness. Does that make sense? So if you're shooting for 131, you need to take it off at 126, right? Because if you wait till that last moment, it's going to be overcooked. So it will not be cold when you, it was that cold when you ate it? All right. So Susan and Ann said it wasn't cold when they ate their steak. And I actually let that sit a little bit longer.
And then the last one I see here is, I think maybe a clarification about the sous vide, but won't boiling or parboiling, won't boiling chicken for 20 minutes cook it all the way through?
It's kind of a touch under before you do that. So the other thing is too, is that if you do that earlier in the day, you want to make sure that you put that chicken in the refrigerator so that you keep it in sort of a safe temperature state. The challenge again, if you're doing chicken thighs on the grill, is the fat content will make it flare, and you'll end up with charcoal briquettes. If you don't do it low and slow. So one way to just sort of take the guessing out of it is parboil it, and you'll be good to go.
Well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much, Trisha, for this today.
It's my pleasure.
Um, I hope that people get to grill this weekend, especially learning all these new techniques or how to properly grill or how to make a really good chimichurri too with what you have growing at home.
And the chimichurri tastes really good with the chicken, with steak, fish. It goes with just everything. Really good on potatoes, both white potatoes and sweet potatoes. So it's a pretty versatile. It's pretty versatile.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. This was recorded and will be on our YouTube page. Trisha, do you have any last words you'd like to say?
My last words are please, please, please support your local restaurants. We need people to come out. Here at the Inn, we've designed a lot of outdoor seating space. Please, please, please come and support us so that we can continue on our road to recovery.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Trisha, and thank you everyone for attending.
It's my pleasure.